Hey guys, Graham and Chris back here with you again on Out of Left Field. Going to be a very different show today. Chris is going to kind of explain. If you haven't had a chance to see the video that we put out this week, please go to our Facebook page, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham, and watch that video first. It'll give you kind of an idea of why this show is taking place. But we have a good friend of the show, Adnan Virk, on with us. And Chris, I want to go ahead and kind of give you the floor to explain to everybody what this is going to be about today and why Adnan has graciously agreed to join us for today's topics.
Sure. So I just wanted to start off prefacing the show by saying that, as I pointed out in the video earlier this week, the show's not going to be about baseball this week. There are other things that are more important than baseball, and there are other things the show's not necessarily going to be about as well. Specifically, the show is not going to be about politics or religion. The subject matter in the show will lend itself to political debates. Graham and I would ask that you keep your comments and responses civil and respectful of everyone. But this is about humanity, not religion, not politics. We don't care, we don't know what your political or religious views are, but we hope that we can all agree that if your interpretation of those politics or religion call for you to hate or murder innocent people, then those views are not only wrong, but grossly misrepresentational of the whole. We hope you can stay tuned. Enjoy today's show. We're going to discuss the personal impact of tragedy on one of sports television's greatest rising stars and also a great friend and supporter of our show. Adnan, it's great to have you with us today.
Graham, Chris, thanks so much for having me on, fellas. You know, I always enjoy talking to you guys about baseball, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk about, as you said, more serious matters at hand. It's interesting. Normally, I'm never nervous ever. You know, talking to a small group of people, large group of people on the radio, whatever. But as you guys were talking, I started getting a little nervous because I'm like, this is heavy stuff. You're right. This isn't just joking around and having a good time and goofing on silly things. These are really a serious subject matter. So, secondly, I just wanted to say thanks for giving me this forum. As everything that's been unfolding in the news and in politics the last couple of months, I've kind of felt like kind of what you alluded to, like there's more important things right now than sports, and I should probably try to use whatever public forum I have to weigh in on it. And it's a little bit tricky because ESPN discourages us from, commenting on politics and social media, and I totally recognize why that is. The great Michael Jordan line, even Republicans buy shoes. When people would ask him why he wouldn't weigh in on matters relating to Democrats, and it's like, just trying to stay even. As a sportscaster, I'm just trying to satisfy the audience, whether it's Baseball Tonight or college football or college basketball or ESPN Radio or my Cinephile podcast. So, I always treat it as people come to ESPN because they want to escape from politics. If they want that, they go to MSNBC or CNN or Fox. And if they're coming to us, it's just for fun. But I have definitely felt, especially in the last week or so, that I should be out there somehow talking to people, explaining the position of Muslims in America, explaining what Islam is all about, trying to curb perhaps some of the Islamophobia out there. So I can't thank you both enough for giving me this opportunity in this venue.
Well, it is certainly an honor to have you on. I mean, we have been fortunate to have you on several times for baseball talk, and we look forward to it more in the future. For our listeners who don't know, as you can probably tell by Adnan's name, he is of Islamic descent, but he's also Canadian. You were born up in Canada, Toronto, or nearabouts, if I remember correctly. So what happened within the past week or so with the terrorist attack in Toronto, or in Quebec City, rather, up in Canada, at a mosque, I had to imagine really kind of shakes you to the core. And as a father of two young children, I mean, I can't imagine what has to be going through your head and your heart as you're seeing these things happen in the news, but then it's becoming more and more close to close to your home. I saw you retweet something very similar to that, and I can't recall, but something, don't tell anybody that you're Muslim was kind of the crux of the tweet, and just how dark it's become that you can't even, whether or not anybody agrees or disagrees, but you have to be careful of who you even tell what your religious beliefs are, because someone may have this radical wrong idea and take matters into their own hands in a horrific way.
Yeah, that's well said. It is definitely scary. You would have thought in the past that regardless of gender, race, religion, everyone's accepting of each other to some extent, and we all kind of get along reasonably well. But as you mentioned, those events, what happened in Quebec City just rattles me to my core. It's as sad as any event as I've heard of recently. These people are just congregating for prayer. Like there's no evil agenda here. There's no nefarious attitudes being presented. It's just people looking to pray. It's just people observing their faith and being obedient to God, and then somebody comes and kills them and wounds them, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. You think about the Charleston church and the murders that occurred there, and all these religious homicides that happen. It's awful to think of these people who are so vulnerable in that state and feeling self-sacrificial, and just like I said, pointing out their observance to God instead ends up in bloodshed. It's just so sad. And you're right. In the past, growing up, as you said, born in Toronto, and I grew up in Kingston, which is a few hours away, it was never a big deal that I'm Muslim. Like, to my friends, okay, we get it. Okay, he's different. He doesn't celebrate Christmas. All right, he doesn't eat pork. Okay, interesting that there's a few nuances as you get older, but you guys know, and your kids really don't care. They're actually not very discerning. Like, I know some people say kids can be bullies and tough, but I think the other way. I think kids just go, oh, okay, Adnan doesn't have a Christmas tree, whatever. Oh, he still wants to play pond hockey with us, or we're going to play baseball, or we're going to do all the things that kids do, and it's really not a big deal. They just go, okay, he's a different color, comes from a different place. But as you said, I'm Canadian, and that's the way I've always approached things. And I was joking with a friend of mine about that. I said, in the past you'd grow up and somebody'd say, where are you from? And I just always meant Canada. But now I know when someone says, where are you from, they mean, oh, you have a different color of skin. You can't possibly be an American. Like, where are you actually from? So that saddens me. It's such a small thing. But as you mentioned, we now have 3 boys. My youngest is 3 months old, and my wife, they're all American-born. They are U.S. citizens. They are stars and stripes all the way. And yet it saddens me that no matter what, there's going to be people in this country who, when they see them, go, where are you from? They go, what do you mean? Like, I'm from Connecticut. No, where are you really from? And the inference being that, unless you're a white American or a white Christian, that you're actually from some other place. And it's like, well, we all came from some other place. Like, we're all immigrants at one point or another. And we all have the same collective, which is to overcome bigotry and hate. And I think the biggest stat here, Graham and Chris, that I've heard is that it's like over 50% of Americans don't know any Muslims. So I actually am more sympathetic maybe than other members of my faith, because I go, oh, okay, so let's suppose you live in a rural area in America. You don't know any Muslims. And unfortunately, when you turn on the news, you see San Bernardino or you see what happened in Paris, and you go, man, like I'm not anti any religion, but what's going on with these guys? Like every time I turn on, I just see Islamic terror or radicalists, and I never like saying Islamic terrorists, because in my head I'm like, well, there's nothing Islamic about that. I would never say Christian terrorists or Jewish terrorists. I'm like, there's just terrorists. There's nothing to do with our religion that supports violence in any form, shape, or matter. So I just say, okay, terrorism has infected our religion, and that's a real sad thing, because there's 1 billion Muslims in the world. The vast majority of Muslims live their lives in a peaceful, obedient manner. They are kind to others. They have all the ideals of all the major religions. If you look at Judaism and Christianity and Islam, there's so many similarities, whether it's a holy book, whether it's called the Torah, the Bible, or the Quran, whether it's believing in prophets. Jesus is thought to be a prophet under Islam, which I think most people don't realize. They just think, oh, okay, you guys have Muhammad, and that's something different. It's like, no. But that Muhammad is also a prophet, but we believe in the prophets before him, as Jesus, as Abraham, as Moses, which Jews believe as well. So there's so many similarities, but unfortunately, whatever differences occur is what people harp on. So I understand that, like I said, if you don't know any Muslims and you see these terrorist attacks, you go, all right, we've got to heighten security. 1 American life lost is way too many. We've got to tighten things up. But it really saddens me when I hear about the travel ban. And as you said very well, both you guys, this isn't about politics. I got plenty of friends who are Republicans. I got plenty of friends who are Democrats. I myself cannot vote. As a Canadian, I did not vote in this past election, Democrat or Republican. I do not have that right. And this isn't a party thing, but it turns into a political thing. It becomes, oh, okay, Republicans supporting this, or Democrats don't believe this, and then the president becomes demonized and the left becomes ridiculed, and you go, hang on, this shouldn't be so polarizing. It should just be simple as this. These 7 countries that have been labeled, this is a highly subjective list. These are all Muslim-majority countries. There has not been in the past a strong spread of terror from these countries. This is an awfully rash and reckless way to do the ban, and that's why there's constant chaos. And then I understand how people who say, all right, listen, I get that. I got nothing against people from Yemen who are here under legal means and have a green card now, unfortunately, are being detained at the airport. That's a shame, but we have to, prioritize security. And I don't care for these protests. I'm just trying to get on a plane. I don't need people, jamming up the flights. So there's so many different issues to this. But listen, I think when people get bogged down in the politics, that's where it gets messy, because people say, well, I've got to be loyal to my party and denounce the other side. And when you just as you guys said, focus on humanity. Just focus on the people. Forget about what side you're on. Forget about what team you're on. Syrian refugees are people who are fleeing a war-torn country. They're people in desperation. I mean, as Christians, you would just say, Jesus was a refugee himself. He believed in helping the poor, the sick, the infirm, etc. There have been no instances of Syrian refugees causing terrorism in American soil. It's simply a matter of helping. Now, I understand it. People say, listen, we've got to heighten security. You limit the amount of Syrian refugees. I don't believe in the way President Obama had a certain number. Okay, fine. You're open to that opinion. But I just think causing chaos of just doing it suddenly and all of a sudden people, as I said, if you're a doctor who was born in Iran but he's been living in the U.S. and has a green card and just happened to be overseas and is trying to get back in the country, you've been detained. Like this has happened to thousands of people. And it's really awful to see. And I think, unfortunately, it adds to the blend of Islamophobia and ignorance and people just saying, again, nothing personal against your religion, but we can't take any chances. What I see is bad stuff. And that's where I say, listen, you cannot look at a relatively small group of people, minuscule group of people, if you looked at all the vast majority of Muslims and hold them accountable for an entire religion. You can't have the president's chief of staff saying Islam is a cancer and saying, 80% of these people want to kill us. Like, these are just dangerous statements, and you can't just throw that out there. I just think it's patently unfair. But ultimately, listen, I think the president has his heart in the right place. I think he does, of course, care about America and probably doesn't hold any ill will against Muslims. He has business interests in Dubai, a golf course, etc. Of course, he's been a worldly guy. He has interests all over the world. Of course, he's dealt with Muslim business people, not only Americans, but overseas. So I think what ends up happening is, like I said, people focus on the politics rather than the humanity of the people involved. And it just saddens me when I hear about what happened in Quebec City, that there's a murder taking place, that people have this Islamophobia. It's really sad. And to personalize it, we had an issue in Connecticut, which is, of course, where I live, and it was a couple of years ago. It was after the terrorist attack in Paris. So the next day, a few people from our mosque went there, and they saw bullet holes in the roof. So our president, called a few of us and just said, okay, here's the situation. We can't discuss this. The FBI is investigating it. They're investigating it as a hate crime. And that was a very shaky few days for us. I take my wife and kids to the mosque every Friday just to go for our weekly prayers. We often go on Saturday because the kids have religious meetings, the equivalent of Bible study. The same thing, it's Quran study. You're studying the Quran, you're learning religious prayers, etc. So they do that normally on Saturdays. So you better believe, fellas, there was palpable fear of, hang on a second, what if somebody just goes crazy and comes in with a gun, and what are we going to do here? Like, we cannot be more worrisome about this issue. And the FBI came, and they sealed it off, yellow tape, and this is a hate crime. They started investigating. And they ended up finding the suspect and the actual person who did it, and it was the next-door neighbor to our mosque in Meriden, Connecticut. His name is Ted Hakey. He's a former Marine. His Facebook and Twitter was littered with messages that were anti-Islam and talking about how this is a religion that needs to be curbed out and stopped, and really hateful stuff. And this is, again, a scary situation. All right, well, what happens now? They arrest him, and I don't know the law very well. Again, being Canadian, I've never been the victim of a hate crime or anything like this, and the punishment could be up to a year in prison for this. And Ted Hakey, through his lawyer, said he wanted to meet with some of us and wanted to discuss what happened. And lo and behold, he could not have been more contrite and more apologetic. And he explained the situation. He said, listen, I just had a few drinks. I was watching on the news what happened in Paris. I just got upset and let the best guess to me, grabbed a gun, and I just took a few shots at your mosque because, as I said, he's a next-door neighbor. He was able to kind of send a message, so to speak, and that's it. And he said, being a Marine, I've seen a lot of hostility, either against Muslims or in favor of Muslims, etc. So it's, this is where I come from. This has been my perspective. And our president, a few of us explained to him, well, this is what our religion's about. Like, I know what you've seen in the news, and I understand how that could poison your image, but this is who we are. Islam's all about peace and supporting others, and we're 1 billion strong, and we believe in equality among men and women, and respect and love for all, and it's love for all, hatred for none, and peace and blessings for all. And we've been hijacked by an incredibly small minority of terrorists who have unfortunately infiltrated our religion and are now representative to the Western world because of the influence that they have. But we could not be more averse to them. I once said to Kurt Schilling, of course you guys know Schilling, his tenure at Baseball Tonight, when he was posting some stuff anti-Islam, and he got suspended with that tweet. And I said to him, Schill, and Kurt and I, by the way, for the record, got along great. He was always good to me, and he's a really funny guy and very smart. And even though I may disagree with him politically, that didn't really affect our relationship. I said to him, Shill, you understand, I hate these guys more than anybody. And he's like, no, I know. And I said, no, do you understand? Like, imagine you practice your religion, and then some other people completely pervert and poison your religion, and then that's what people think your faith is. Like, how much would you hate someone doing that to your faith? He's like, exactly. I'm like, yeah. So you can imagine how I feel against ISIS and ISIL compared to you. Like, we obviously already hate anybody who's causing terror and bloodshed. How do you think I feel, the fact that they're making all of us misrepresented? And Kurt understood. He said, no, I get it. He goes, I work with a lot of war veterans. You like war veterans because they've seen the damage that war can cause, so they are even more vigilantly against war unless it has to happen. So, anyways, back to Ted Haakey. He was very apologetic, and he pleaded for contrition. And this is all about acceptance and forgiveness. And our president of our mosque and the few leaders that we have said, all right, if you're genuine, if you're sincere, here's a pamphlet, here's a book about Islam, here's what the Quran reads. We'll have a conversation. And any tough questions that you may have had or any misperceptions, all good. Like, you let us know what you think we're about, and we'll tell you what we're about and go from there. And so much so, Graham and Chris, when Ted Haakey stood trial in Connecticut, I unfortunately couldn't make it. I had to work. But there was a few of us there who were supporting him and asked the judge for leniency, said, throw out the sentence. We recognize the hate crime has such and such sentence, but you know what? You should give him nothing. He made a mistake. He was apologetic. Unfortunately, there's a lot of Islamophobia right now. He fell victim to it. We believe that he's sincere, and we forgive him, period. That's a big part of any person's faith, is if somebody commits a sin and they're genuine about it, then you forgive them and you move on. And that's what we said. And the judge and whatever the media that were there were very overwhelmed by this. And we're not doing it for the attention. We're just like, this is the right thing to do. He ended up serving a sentence. He's now been released from jail. It was definitely a curb sentence, and the judge did say, because of the Muslim community's support of Haakey and the forgiveness, that definitely added to his decision. But when I heard about Quebec City, I said, listen, we had a shooting in Connecticut, and maybe it wasn't when we were doing prayer service. Maybe it was 2 a.m, and Ted Haakey wasn't out to kill anybody. He was just looking to make a statement. But as soon as I hear Quebec City murders, I go, all right, there's no escaping this. And I'll say this as a proud Canadian. I have friends back home saying, oh, my God, what's happening down there? And Trump said this, and the party saying this. And then I hear that, and I said, you know what? Nobody's immune. Don't have this arrogance that, oh, Canada's above that. We're a more, pluralistic or tolerant nation. There's going to be intolerance everywhere. There's going to be intolerance in Muslim countries or in Christian countries. There's going to be people who do not believe in doing the right thing and do the wrong thing. But ultimately, all you can do, fellas, is pray, is lead your life in a good manner. The fact that you guys reached out to me, that's the best lesson I can hear. That's the best thing I can do is someone saying, oh, you know what? This guy's a good example of his faith. Muhammad Ali is a good example of his faith. Ahmad Rashad, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Mahershala Ali, who just won the Best Supporting Actor Award, the Screen Actors Guild, for the movie Moonlight. He's going to win Best Supporting Actor. And in his speech at the SAG Awards said, when I called my mom, who's a Christian minister, and told her I had converted to Islam 11 years ago, that was a tough conversation to have. But I'm a Muslim, and I'm proud, and she's proud of me, and that's where we should be moving. So I hope that people focus on the positive. I hope they don't get stuck in the politics of arguing which side is right or wrong, and just focus on the humanity and doing the right thing.
Well, I can't agree with you more, Adnan. To give you just a little bit more background about me, when I was young, I had the great opportunity to host English learning students from the University of California, Davis, in my home. I hosted students from all over the world, 27 countries on 5 continents, including students from Saudi Arabia, Palestine, Yemen, and Egypt. And one of my very closest friends is a man named Suleiman. He's from Saudi Arabia. And he is the kindest person I've ever met, bar none. And he was probably, to a 12-year-old kid, probably the greatest representation of Islam that a 12-year-old white middle-class kid in the United States could ever hope to have. I took that representation with me into the military. When I was in the Army, as you know, I served in Iraq. I saw the division there. I saw the anger and the fear that it caused not only among troops but also among the civilians in Iraq. But no matter what happened or how things happened, I always had that strong basis of that great representation of Islam that I got from Suleiman when I was a child, that carried forward into my military career, that always made me sort of immune to this idea that, well, this is Islam, or this is something that all Muslims believe. And I felt sometimes like I was the only one who would say, when something would happen, I would say, well, that's not because they practice Islam. That has nothing to do with Islam. But my entire life I've had those lessons sort of imprinted in me. And when I heard about what happened in Quebec, in fact, I hadn't really even read about it until Graham contacted me and told me that he had reached out to you. And then I finally picked up my phone and looked at the news, and I saw what had happened. And just as a person, I was devastated by this. I mean, any loss of life is tragic to me, and especially as a veteran who has seen senseless loss of life. Any loss of life is tragic to me, but any loss of life that comes from a place of hate or fear-mongering is that much worse, because it tells me that all of these sort of political ideologies that have been, this isn't just in America, obviously. I was shocked when I heard this happened in Canada. But this isn't just in America. These are the same ideologies that led to things like Brexit, the same ideologies that led to what's going on in the United States now. And it's sad to me that these things are being mainstreamed so much now that it's causing this sort of outburst of hateful violence against not just minority groups, but innocent people in general. I really feel like one of the things that I wanted to say to you while I had you on the show was that I am sorry that you have to experience this in such a first-person way, especially considering that you take your kids to mosque every Friday, you take them to Quran study every Saturday, and this is, for you, a frontline fear. And that makes me sad.
No, I appreciate that, Chris, and I wish, I think a lot of what you said there is very powerful, but the fact you had that friend in Suleiman, I think that's critical. Like, I think that's wonderful that at a young age, you're able to latch on to this guy and you're just friends, and like you said, you're like, oh, he's representative of his faith and he's a great guy and couldn't be, as you said, a kinder, gentler soul. So that remains an anchor. So that no matter what you see, you can always harken back to that and go, no, that doesn't jive with him, and that doesn't jive with what he would believe or what his ideals are, and that's, how he espouses his life. So don't get caught up in what others may say or what others may do. So I think that's beautifully expressed, that you're able to have that attachment, and I appreciate your sympathy, and I know how sincere and genuine both you guys are, and I will say that I have been floored. It's easy to focus on the negative, boys, but I have been floored by the amount of support from coworkers, guys like yourself who just said, hey, listen, I hope you're doing all right. If you need anything, let me know. I'm going to pray for you, and I hope that your wife and kids are okay, and I hope that they feel comfortable, and I hope that they don't feel that they have to deny to people that they're Muslim and they're not uncomfortable. And, years ago my dad said to me, and it's just a general rule of thumb for anybody, just don't discuss politics or religion at work. You're there to work, and politics or religion can be divisive issues and personal issues, and you just don't want to get into it. And it's felt like more and more now you can't avoid it. Like it's obviously now, because in sports, I'm sure you guys have discussed it on your show. Obviously, we are at ESPN because Steve Kerr's talking about it, and Greg Popovich is talking about it, and Rondé Hollis-Jefferson is talking about it. So if athletes are doing so and coaches, you kind of feel compelled. Like, how could you ignore this? Exactly what you said off the top. Like, there's just too much going on right now that we can't really dive into sports. Even my friend Ryan Marcillo wasn't mocking it, but he was kind of saying maybe I'm not equipped to be a sports radio host because I feel like 3 to 5 days a week I should be non-talking sports. Like, if I actually had the temerity to discuss the Pat secondary against Matt Ryan, what's wrong with you? What are you, tone deaf? Like, there's way too much other stuff going on right now. We got to discuss that. And you go, oh, well, I didn't want to go into the news. I don't want to discuss that stuff. That's why I work in sports, to get away from reality. I like the escapism of just fun and games. And, as they always say, the news shows man at his weakest and sports shows man at his best. These are the achievements that you want to focus on. So it's a really unusual time, I think, for all of us. But I appreciate your sentiments, and I've been floored by those who are supportive. And like I said, I have not joined any sort of protests. I checked with our specific branch of Islam, the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam, and they said we don't believe in social protests. We believe in, you can write letters and certainly make your feelings known by small conferences and such, but we don't believe in holding a social protest. Having said that, I have been floored by just seeing how big those crowds are, whether it's New York or Boston or Philly or whatever it is. And I look at those crowds and I see a lot of white faces. I don't see a lot of Muslims doing it necessarily. I see just average Americans saying, hey, this is wrong. Like, this just shouldn't be right. Like, these are people who are here under legal means, and they want to get back in and see their country, and they're being deprived of seeing their families, or they are, refugees escaping horror and bloodshed, and they need asylum. So it has really been touching to show the level of humanity and the level of love that I have in my life from people that care about me and my family. So I do think it's easy to focus on the negative and maybe tweets that can get sent my way or frustrations I may feel, but there's been a lot of support and positive feelings as well.
And Adnan, something that you said that kind of stuck with me as you were kind of saying, we all have our own beliefs, but they're very similar. And I had the fortune when I was in college to get to know a retired military chaplain. And those who don't know, chaplains may go to seminary for one specific religion, be it Christianity, and it may be one of the many different delineations, but they are expected to be able to provide religious services and counseling for every religion. And one of the best things that he ever said to me was that, how Catholics have a rosary, well, right, 99 beads. Well, Islam is the same. They have the same beliefs of God, that God is good, God is just, God is fair, God is loving. There are so many similarities, regardless of what name you call it. And again, we're not here to try and to preach or convert or any of that side. I was born and raised in a very devout Christian home, and I still practice that. But I've also enjoy in my daily life when I meet people from other countries or other religions to talk to them about their culture, because that is something that I asked, and I kind of want to get your take on this. Obviously, having lived in Canada and the U.S. for your whole life and your kids being born here, it may be different, but I'm not sure where your parents, if they were born in Canada as well or if they moved, but the one thing I hear the most is how difficult it is to try and keep that semblance of your culture alive when so many, when children are kind of inundated with the American culture all around them, and Islamic families or any from anywhere in the country or in the world, could be from Turkey or from Germany or wherever, and they want to kind of keep some of those personal semblances of their culture and their faith inside their family. How do you go about doing that, or how is it instilled for you by your parents, and how do you do it now for your boys? Which, congratulations on your third. I didn't know, so immense congratulations, and I'm happy for
thanks.
you and for a healthy mom and healthy child. But I guess as a father, how do you look now at these boys as they grow, knowing that you have you want to teach them in the ways that you want them to grow, as it says in the Christian Bible?
It's a great question,
still knowing
Brad, because that's it's great.
But while still knowing how much difficulty there is in the world.
No, you're right, because it happens, I think, for all cultures. Like, no matter where your parents may have come from, like for immigrant families, it's really tricky. I find either the families go, okay, we'd like to maintain the semblance of our culture, whether we came from China or Italy or Jamaica, or they just go, okay, we're all in with whatever we are now. Like, you're an American or you're a Canadian, so just live your life the way you want. Whatever we did, that's a different lifestyle. For my parents, they're very proud of their background, having been born in Pakistan, and then my mom moved to England when she was only 10. My dad left when he was in his early 20s, went to college in Germany, and then they got married, went to Canada. Now my dad's lived in Canada for 45 years now. Like, he's Canadian. I always laugh when people say, where are you from? Like, my dad has an accent. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, he's lived almost his entire life as a Canadian, as has my mom. And yet, they're not like a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant family. They clearly are different in terms of culture and stuff. As far as that could be as simple as the food we eat, to the fact that we're offering prayers at all times, to the fact that, like I said, just even in kind of manners and customs and such. Like, it's a great point you make about raising with my boys. And for example, Adnan, my second son's in kindergarten, so. I volunteer at his school for 1 hour a week, and I was talking to his teacher, Jennifer Clinton, who's wonderful, and she just knew, like, we were putting together, like, these little wreaths and mistletoes and stuff, and she was like, do you celebrate Christmas? And I was like, no. And I was like, that's smart that she would even just know to ask that. Like, she just wasn't sure, so she asked, which is totally cool. And I tell her, she's like, actually, we don't. She's like, okay, great, well, here's something else. And what it was there was poems that were, like, specifically about Christmas, and then she gave me one which was just specifically about winter, like, rather than Christmas is coming, sleigh bells, et cetera. It was like, winter's coming, and it's such a fun time, and spend time with family, et cetera. And I'm like, that's just a kind-hearted gesture. That is a perfect example of being inclusive. So Adnan is still like all the other kids in his class getting something from his teacher, and yet he's not getting something which will confuse him or will, construct with his beliefs or his parents' beliefs or what he's being taught. Because then all of a sudden he goes, well, hang on a second, how come all my other friends celebrate Christmas and I'm not celebrating Christmas? Which is the conversation we've had with our son Yusuf, who's now 8. It's like, well, I don't get it. And I was like, well, they're Christians. So, or in fact, as you guys know, quite a few people who aren't even religious now obviously just celebrate Christmas, and that's kind of the way it is. So I'm like, well, they're not Muslim. Since we're Muslim, we don't celebrate Christmas. We have our own religious occasions, Yusuf, which we celebrate and go from there. And it's like, oh, okay. And, like, we've been fortunate that he just gets it. He's like, oh, okay. Like, I go to the mosque, they go to the church, or they're not religious, or this is how we do things. Like, all right. And again, I think sometimes people underestimate how smart kids can be. Like, they just understand if you explain something to them. Adnan, again, my second son, last couple weeks ago, I went to school and I saw him. I got there a little late. I go on Fridays to have lunch with him. And then one of the other kids was eating some bacon. So then Adnan said, yeah, I ate bacon. And I said, wait, no, we don't eat bacon. What do you mean you ate bacon? Because he was eating pizza. And I guess they put bacon on top of the pizza. He said, yeah, I eat bacon. And the other girl, I'm like, did he eat bacon? She's like, yeah. So I tell my mom, somebody tell his mom, to my wife, and she's upset even with the teacher, like, oh, we put it specifically. Adin's not supposed to eat pork, et cetera. So, his teacher's like, okay, I'm going to look into it. I asked the cafeteria workers, et cetera. So when I went for lunch this week to go meet him, immediately, like, one of the little kids in his class, these are a bunch of 5-year-olds, they're like, oh, Adnan doesn't eat bacon. We know Adnan doesn't eat bacon. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? I'm like, well, Miss Clinton came over just to make sure to tell him. I'm like, all right, everyone knows. Okay, no bacon. All right, no bacon for this kid. And then it's funny that I asked the cafeteria worker, and she's like, oh, it's turkey bacon. I'm like, oh, okay, because I go, we eat turkey bacon all the time. Like, my boys love turkey bacon. I make it all the time. So I go, he's 5. He's not going to know the difference between turkey bacon and real bacon. She goes, I can assure you we always have turkey bacon, because we have a strong Jewish population here as well. So they want to eat kosher. They don't eat pork. So I'm like, oh, okay. So there's just a small way of, like, trying to raise your kid. Again, these are all American boys. Their dad works at ESPN. Like, they watch football. We're excited for the Super Bowl this weekend. And yet, we're going to go to our mosque tomorrow, do the day for Quran study, and then afterwards we just kind of do our thing and go to Chuck E. Cheese, as any other American families would do, and then Sunday we're going to watch football and pizza and wings, and that's how you do it. I think you just kind of have to try to find the balance of what you can. Now, for my parents, it was different, right? They're more even cultural things like Bollywood movies or music and such. I'm 100% Canadian there, so what I'm growing up with, I don't have any influence of that. So I guess there's a natural dilution of color over each generation, right? Because it's like food-wise, sure. Like I like Indian or Pakistani food, but my wife's going to make whatever. Like I love spaghetti and meatballs. I like steak. So, over time I would think stuff like movies or music or food or clothing, those cultural things can go away. But I think that's the separation then. It's a matter of religion versus culture and just, having a mutual respect and a healthy respect for all of it. And eventually, guys, listen, it's my kid's life. I'm going to support them wherever I can, but I got plenty of my friends whose parents were religious, and then my friends are not religious, and it's like, all right, that's just the way it works sometimes. Like some people, as you said, Graham, you grew up in a devout Christian family, you've maintained that faith, and I think that's wonderful. But some kids don't maintain that faith, and it's like, okay, well, that's no indictment of the parents. That's not a flaw on their part. They do the best they can, and I think it's important to try to pass your faith along because I know how important religion's been to me and how great God's been to me. But maybe for some people it doesn't work for them or they have issues with religion. So, again, I'm never one to judge or criticize. I'm just trying to figure out our own way, and that's enough of a challenge these days.
So I want to just sort of piggyback on something you said and try to try to wind down the show on a little bit of a lighter note about food, because food, as Graham can tell you, is one of my favorite things in the world. And I have this theory, and I think that more problems in this world could be solved by sharing food than by all the politics or ambassadors or any of those sorts of things combined. I think that, if we could just get some people to try, kebabs and naan or biryani, something like that, something Pakistani, and then go have ramen for dinner or Greek, have gyros for lunch. Right. More people can learn about each other, about different cultures just by eating their foods. And I think the thing, and this is where I'm going to try to kind of tie this into actually being about humanity and not just about the fact that I'm fat. I can't wait for this segue. Right. I think the thing that will surprise most people is how similar foods are.
Yeah.
When you eat Greek food and then realize that Greece and Italy share a spice palette, or that Indian food and Pakistani food are very similar.
Right.
I think the idea that those similarities are so multinational, and they're so pan-national,
right,
that the more people could get out and eat each other's food, I think the more they would realize how similar they really are.
Yeah, I mean, to further your point, where I grew up in Kingston, it's a small town. At the time, it was maybe 60,000. I think now maybe 100,000 it's blossomed into. But, small area. They used to have something every year called folklore. My brother and I would always look forward to it. We thought it was the best. And folklore was you'd go to, some assembly hall and you pay, $20, whatever it is. I'm sure the time was a little cheaper, but and it's all like celebrations of the world. So you go, they have a Jamaica pavilion, and so they have people playing the steel drums, and they're offering jerk chicken. And then they go to Greece, and they have people screaming Opa, and they're, offering Ouzo and all these kind of things. And you literally go to each one. And I thought it was the coolest thing, because I was like, oh, wow, like this is the way the world is. Like everyone's got all these different cool cultural traditions, and it's colorful, and it's fun, it's vibrant, and it's all about pride. Like everyone's really proud of where they're from and what they've got. And, hey, try this out. And share this, and what do you think of this? And if you don't like this, well, that's even funnier. Like, oh, I guess Adnan can't take the Vietnamese food. A little too hot for him, even though he likes Indian and Pakistani food, which is spicy. It's like, oh, okay. Like, it was always just kind of fun. And I wish I could find that. I was thinking about it the other day. I'm like, I wish we had like a folklore here in Connecticut. I could just take my kids, to your point, it's just sampling the food, but then it's all right. Learn about different cultures and customs. And I was always fascinated by that stuff as a kid. My dad was always laughing. He's like, because I used to love geography as a kid. I would spin the globe, and I'd be like, all right, you hit on Russia. I'm like, all right, let me learn about Stalingrad. And my dad's like, what a rather curious child I seem to have raised here. And I'm like, yeah, I think people that stay insular, I think if you just stay inside of your church or synagogue or mosque or whatever your inner bubble is, and if you don't experience other things, then that can generally lead to ignorance, because you go, well, I don't know anything else but anybody else. I just know what I do. I know how I roll. I know how I was born, and that's it. The more you open yourself up and go, oh, okay, so that's how you view things, or that's how you were raised. Oh, okay, well, that's different than me, but I still find it interesting. As long as you're always respectful and open-minded, I think you can't lose, fellas. Like, honestly, we have this seminar now at our mosque called Coffee and Cake, and it's just every Friday night, 8 o'clock. Anybody wants to come, ask questions, knock it out. And so a couple of weeks ago, I'd say maybe 10, 12 people showed up, and there's about 4 of us there. And I could tell at first, you go to any sort of seminar or whatever it is, nobody wants to ask a question. And it was literally just, hey, we know what's going on right now in the world, and with President Trump and some rhetoric, et cetera. So whatever questions you guys might have, like, go for it. I don't care what it is, like, as difficult as it may be. And you can tell nobody wants to be the first. And I'm like, go ahead, say it, like, whatever. And then so the one woman's like, okay, what's Sharia law? I'm like, okay, well, I'll start explaining what that is, why that's not accurate, why some of it, it's just not bunk. And then it's as simple as, why don't you guys eat pork? Okay, well, explain that a little bit. Sure, all right. Treatment of women. Okay, let's go from there. And it's like when people get more and more comfortable, right, then they can kind of ask whatever. And honestly, this is the truest thing I can say. I'm so grateful to both of you to have me on to talk about this. If there's one person who listens to this conversation just goes, oh, you know what, let me just Google alislam.org, alislam.org, and just says, let me just type in a few frequently asked questions and try to learn a few things. And it doesn't mean if tomorrow I'm going to understand Islam. It doesn't mean if tomorrow I'm going to say, okay, I'm all right with all aspects of the religion. But let me just try to knock out a few misperceptions or misconceptions and just figure out what's going on. If you just do a little bit of homework and just take the time to learn a little bit, I think everybody's going to be a lot more beneficial. And there was nothing more beneficial to me than a couple of weeks ago, people walking out going, hey, thanks a lot for doing this. Like, thanks for opening up the mosque and just letting us ask a few questions. So I feel a lot better. And I'm going to take this message now to any of my neighbors who say, oh, is this true or is that true? I'll go, no, you should go meet these guys because you can ask them anything you want. Like, they're open books. So I really appreciate it, fellas. It's really nice for you guys to have me.
It was an absolute honor for us. I want to go off one thing Chris said, and this was a story I had read years ago, and you talk about, kind of the sitting down and appreciating culture and breaking bread. Norman Schwarzkopf, who a lot of our listeners who are much younger or weren't in the military won't know the name, but he led the original coalition against Iraq and Desert Storm.
Norman.
His father was a general back in the 60s in Iran and in Pakistan and that area of the world, and very much taught his son the proper way to be cordial and be polite and accept culture. So when he went over to the Middle East to try to set up the coalition, he was offered a drink that I believe had, I think it was goat's blood in it of some kind, and he recalls in his biography that none of his other subordinates would drink, and he looked at them and said, "You will drink it." And he looked at and he kind of bowed to all the leaders that were there, and he finished it and set the glass down empty, and they all kind of looked at him and their eyes widened of, oh my God, this guy actually, he didn't gag, but respects our culture to appreciate the gift we gave him, as much of a test as it was, and that kind of solidified the entire rest of that battle because of the respect that they gained by Schwarzkopf's willingness to accept their offering, but also to that he was taught very young to be respectful and appreciative of other cultures, and I think that's something that as we say can very much go to today and would make this world a much better place.
Yeah, I totally think that's a great anecdote, and that's an example, again, someone like yourself who's been overseas, who's seen a different world, who recognizes, where similarities are, where differences exist as well. And I think if you keep an open mind about things, generally you're going to be pleasantly surprised and be rewarded. So I just hope people kind of try to fight through the ignorance and focus on the positive, and we'll get through this, and eventually it's going to be fun because we're all going to be talking about baseball because we're only, a couple of weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. So that's good news.
Finally. So, Adnan, honestly, it's been an honor to have you on today. I'm really glad that we could just sort of take a break, take a step back from baseball and what this show's about and the platform of the show and discuss real issues. I will also say this, that if you do find a festival that has that huge variety of international food in Connecticut, let me know with a little bit of advance notice, and I will fly there.
That would be great, right? What a road trip that would be. I'm going to this folklore thing in Connecticut. Virk set up. Can't wait.
But seriously, thank you for coming on. Thank you for discussing this with us. Thanks for being here. Guys, this has been a somewhat unorthodox show, but I think that at the end of the day, it's been helpful, and it's been sort of a bright light on a very dark subject. And I really want to thank Adnan for that. Guys, tune in next week. I promise we'll talk about baseball, and I guarantee that we'll have some things that come straight out of left field.